This is Signature Morning on Signature TV. Recently, of course, we heard about the increase in budget. The numbers are quite scary. Well, not as scary as it is, but some people would say it's a welcome development. The budget was increased by 15% from 47.9 trillion naira to around 54.5 trillion naira. That's around 14.8, just almost 15%. And the government says clearly that the reason for the increase is because of the additional amount of monies that were received from the customs service and from the immigration service. More monies have entered, and the FIRS was also mentioned as part of the revenue organization that got a little more monies, and so they needed to just add it to the budget. So many persons have criticized it. Some welcomed it. Some say that how about we keep these monies, as a safe haven just in case. Because again, the budget already have deficits, all right? So if you have deficit, what are you going to use to finance these deficits? So we have an economist who would talk to us about the implications of this increments across board. I mean, it's one that has bothered a lot of people, and it's one also we want to talk about to expand the discussions as it relates to the topic today. We have with us live in the studio Dr. Frederal Amobi. He is an economist. Good to have you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
All right. I mean, how did you receive the news about this increment by 15%?
Well, just like everybody else, it wasn't really a shock per se because these things happen. Government generates funds and generates revenue on a continuous basis, even after the budget has been signed in, and so it's not particularly a surprise. The only difference this time around is that it has been officially announced. What we have heard in the past is that even after the president assents the budget and the implementation starts, as revenue is generated from customs and VAT and the rest of them, it's usually warehoused somewhere and either implemented as a supplementary budget. But in this case, what the president wants to do is to add it to the already existing budget, which is something new. And that's why it's there's a bit of confusion around how it is going to be applied. But they have been specific in terms of two key areas where they want the funds to be channeled to, which is solid mineral development and infrastructure. It's actually clearer. However, there are still some ways that it could have been, or at least some other suggested ways that it could have been applied, better. When the budget was just passed in December. The budget
is still being looked at. They submitted to the House, so they're still deliberating it.
Yes. And so it's still in the process of being finally assented, which hasn't happened yet. So it is not particularly out of place for this adjustment to be done so that when it's approved once. However, when one looks at it critically, you can say, why, if these are windfalls that are coming in after the budget has been planned and after the budget process has gone on, why not channel it into areas that will impact the average Nigerian directly? Create jobs, areas where things can become a bit more affordable, where more monies can be put in people's pockets, as opposed to channeling them to certain sectors. I don't have a problem with infrastructure because that is critical. We need every penny we can muster to go into infrastructure. We need to get our roads, our power, our bridges, water supply, everything, housing. These are all, critical infrastructure that is required. For solid minerals, for me particularly, I'm a little bit skeptical about that. The reason I say that is because solid minerals is an area that is quite attractive, not only to local investors, but also foreign investors. And so if the solid minerals sector is packaged properly, investors will troop in and Nigeria can make a lot of money out of it. So you don't really have to put money into it unless, and although we haven't seen the details yet, unless part of this fund is going to go into the development of the solid mineral, in other words, packaging it for investment. Because, that is actually one area that one could have looked at. On the other hand, we have a huge deficit. Our foreign deficit today is probably about 35 or 30, 34.8 billion US dollars. If between December and now we have generated about 4.5 trillion naira, which is about $3 billion. If we can generate $3 billion in 2 months, and we have a deficit of about $30 billion, then another school of thought could say, why don't we use part of this windfall to pay off, to at least finance that deficit in the budget, or even take care of our debt. That way, there's less pressure on the economy for future revenues that will be generated. So it goes both ways. It has its good side, which is to know that, at least, revenues are still being generated, and we can get up to, 3-4 trillion naira within a short period of time. And this is going to be ongoing. So this is not just a one-off. In the next 2-3 months, we're going to generate another 4-5 trillion naira, continuously. And so are we going to keep adjusting our budget every time, every quarter? Or are we going to just plan it such that either we now boost our own sovereign wealth fund, amongst other things, to ensure, or at least ensure that the future is a bit more secure for the economy and the things we want to do.
All right. It's hard to track the budget these days because you don't even know which one is being used, because we've seen midterm expenditure framework. We've seen the government, this current administration, use from since 2023 it came into power up until now. There has been several financial documents sent to the National Assembly, and one does not know which one to track. Even with this new budget, there's still a midterm expenditure framework that is still running. So one would wonder, really, is this how this government is run all the way to when it finishes? Because there hasn't been any discussions around harmonizing everything to the budget.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, it is actually a concern because we don't know which economic plan, document we're actually adopting or we are implementing at this time. However, I think there's a bit of a trial and error going on at the moment. If you look at today compared to 3-4 months ago, there's at least a bit more stability in the economy now from some of the things that have been experimented. Inflation has actually slowed down. It's still high at about 34-35%. But the rate at which prices were going up last year has been curtailed a little bit more. There's more economic activity going on. And so that's why we can even see some of these additional revenues coming in that the government wants to now apply to certain core areas that they have identified. Yeah, and so if and when all these documents, like you said, are harmonized, that will actually be fantastic. However, we're not going to wait for all that to happen because Nigerians are going through a lot every day. And so anything that can ease the burden on the average citizen is welcome. We've even seen things like even foreign investment. Nigeria is opening up a little bit more now than before. And so the economy isn't where we want it to be, But the authorities have been able to now stem that slide. Even the local currency has stabilized and is strengthened a little bit against the US dollar. So, we're not seeing that 700, 800, 900, 1,000, 1,500. We've stabilized between 1,500 to 1,550 to the dollar over, at least the past 3 months. Whether that will now become the level for the naira is yet to be seen, because there are also interplays of the other basket of currencies, dollar, pound, dollar, euro, etc., that is going on, that also affects our own exchange rate here. But all in all, personally, I wouldn't have taken that extra and spent it.
Okay.
The way the government is planning to, because what you do now is, even secondary school economics tells you that when you increase government spending, you also fuel inflation.
Yeah.
So we're already in an economy that is highly inflated, with a 35% or 34% inflation rate. The more you're bringing in to spend, the more you're going to increase that figure. So if you want to manage the economy such that you want to rein in inflation, part of what you don't want to do is to overspend. And so if during the budget process, budget was planned properly with the right assumptions and projections, we would have been able to take into account that these revenue would have come in at this time and work towards it. So I'm not indicting the budget office, but I'm also saying that a lot of these variables have to be taken into account prior to even preparing and submitting the budget.
All right. So we have several things to talk about. I mean, there's a lot of people are really saddened. The National Bureau of Statistics show that more Nigerians are going to slide into poverty, given the latest policies by the government. The policies by the government these days seem to be all tariffs hike. I mean, they claim that Nigerians haven't paid the right amount for anything, ranging from fuel to electricity, just name it. It's just everything. And you would wonder if the government is paying the right amount of minimum wage. So that's another argument.
Sure.
But again, when you put up policies of this nature, at what point do you think, because you would assume that government would hire experts to check some of these policies and how they impact the people. After all, governance is all about for the people, right? The good of the people. But when you see a situation where policies impact negatively on the people, isn't it the right thing to do to retrace your steps, to stop those things? Because if you look at all of the policies from 2023 since this government took over office, it's been one that has impacted negatively on every individual. At least, even if you are a rich person, you still feel that impact.
Yes. Typically, when policies are being developed, there's a huge leg of it, or section of that process called stakeholder participation or stakeholder engagement. What hasn't happened, or what hasn't been happening lately, is that some of these policies do not take into account the views of the people they're supposed to impact prior to,
Implementation.
Those policies. And so, and that's why I said it's a trial and error, type regime, whereby we try this. If it works, we continue, we take the credit. We try if it doesn't work, we don't apologize because we're government, but we try something else. So yes, the The policies, some of them have not been people friendly, or at least haven't been quite popular because it takes money out of your pocket. And no matter what regime it is, even if you beg the people to tighten their belts, as long as money is leaving their pockets, they are going to be a bit upset about it, especially if they're not seeing, commensurate development strides from the government side. Yes, and so participation or engagement of every stakeholder is key to ensure that people buy into the policy. People even understand that there could be short-term losses before the long-term gains. If you have that in your head, then you can easily adjust to this, short-term negative impact, knowing that the future will be brighter. And so a lot of information needs to be disseminated to the people. People have to understand that before you take a giant leap forward, you must take a baby step backwards. And so maybe that's actually, what we're experiencing at this time. So I guess we'll just have to watch and just wait and see what happens in the next 3-6 months. But from my own observation and my own research, I believe and I think we have tanked and are now trying to get back on the rise.
I mean, not many persons would agree with that, because there are still some tariffs still hanging that they're trying to, implement. We're talking about the telecom tariffs,
and all that.
and a whole lot of persons are saying, look, I mean, we are not even done with this petrol thing. The thing is still impacting upon us. And then you're bringing telecom high, not just any percent, we're talking 50%.
Yes. I mean, on the telecom side, and I'm not going to defend the telecom sector, but realistically, the telecom tariff has been in effect for more than 10-15 years. I mean, we've been paying the same ₦4 per SMS ever since we've gotten our, SIM cards. Same rates. The telecom communications, just like any other IT or ICT, sector, grows and evolves. We want better services as consumers. We want to move from 4G to 5G, from 5G to 6G to the next G, just like other parts of the world. So if we want that, if we want quick and fast internet service, if we want to be able to stream and download and watch our videos and our movies without interruption or buffering, we have to pay for it. The telecom companies have to upgrade their technology. They have to buy new equipment. They have to improve their services, and they cannot do that at the same rate they were charging in 2005. So we have to brace up to that. If you want something good, you have to put your money down on the table. And it's unfortunate, yes, but that is how it is. For electricity, we wouldn't have complained much if after the electricity tariff, we got what we were promised. We would say, okay, well, the onus is now on us to be a bit more conservative in our homes and in our offices so that we pay less, but we're getting power 24/7. But we're not doing that. And so if you're now talking about another tariff, everybody's like, well, but the one we paid for, we haven't gotten the results or gotten the benefits of it. And yeah, it's only natural to complain.
Do you think that we're on the right track, really? Because, I mean, I've heard several persons say several things. Some say, look, government is for the people, by the people, and for the people. Look, whatever you are saying, whatever policies that you're doing, you must have to have a human aspect, a human face to it.
Yeah.
And then you hear other people say things like, look, we haven't really giving the government the opportunity to do whatever it is that it wanted to do. This is the first time we're trying to do that, because under Goodluck Jonathan, he wanted to remove subsidy and we kicked against it. People who are in government today were among those who kicked against it. So why should we support you to do that this time around? So, and some others say, look, the people are docile, that the government is taking them for granted. And that's the reason why they're doing this and getting away with it. And you can't try this in other African countries. I mean, they tried it in Kenya, for instance, and look at what happened to Kenya. You can try it in Europe or in America. Back to back, consistently, first 2 years in office, well, not even up to 2 years, and you are seeing people getting poorer.
Yeah.
People, getting disillusioned by the situation. Some cannot even feed. I mean, you're not even talking about subsidy. Okay, fine, you remove subsidy from fuel. Where is the subsidy going to? Is it on at least staple foods? No. And security is still on the rise. So there's virtually nothing you can pinpoint and say, look, because of this, I'm going to let this go. Okay, for the betterment of the country, because right now it feels like you're being forced to be, to patronize or maybe to be a patriotic citizen. It's your choice to be patriotic. But there's nothing that's showing that in another 6 months, in another 1 year, okay, give and take, at least there'll be some sort of respite.
Yeah. Well, you see, when we plot graphs, you can go from here to here and back up again. In our own case, over the past almost 2 years now, we've gone from here down, really bottomed out. So trying to even get back to where we were before government came in will be a struggle. Mistakes were made in the past. Everybody knows that. Even removing subsidies just like that, Tariff increases, tax increases, subsidy removals, these things are usually timed over a long period of time. And then, plan so that the impact or the effect on the people would at least be minimized. But what happened was that everything happened within 6 months. Tariffs were removed, foreign exchange, regime was changed.
Devaluation,
electricity hike, this, that, fuel. So many things happened at the same time. It was almost like an atomic bomb that hit Nigeria. And so people went from where they are and then dropped. It was a free fall. Everybody was affected. Now, we're trying to pick up the pieces. Part of what I believe, I'm not in government and I don't defend government, but part of what I believe government has done now is done an assessment, probably realized some of the errors that were committed in the past, and are trying to see how they can be corrected. It's quite massive. Unfortunately, even with this increase in revenue, on the one hand, we're still borrowing on the other hand. And so, which is another part of the whole dilemma. If you're getting more money, why not use it to pay off? Why not borrow less? Why are we still borrowing? But the fact is that part of the borrowing is to cushion the effect of the errors that we made in the past. And so, but this is Nigeria. How do you now ensure that the amount you're borrowing is even going directly into doing that? Another topic for another day. You see. So, yes, we've all been hit. We're coming out of the ashes. We're trying to see whether, what is even left of what we had before, whether it's our businesses, whether, whatever it is. And then to see how we can now, pick up the pieces and try and rebuild or, reconstruct. I don't envy the government because, every government is usually the architect of its own, outcome. But it is what it is, like I say.
But do you think there's any hope in terms of holding on to something? I mean, by next year, May, every political party would have shown us who their candidate for the 2027 election is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how close it is.
Yeah.
Next year, May.
Yeah.
So it means that this administration is it's almost wrapped
Only
up.
1 year, exactly. And your question now should be, can anything happen between now and then? Yes. Yes, there could be some slight changes. There could be a way of at least getting the people to know that, yes, we haven't reached where we were when we started, but at least we are better off today than we were 3 months ago. I mean, I started this with giving instances about how there's been some slight improvement in the past 3-4 months. How at least prices, have, even in some places, have actually gone down. But at least there's been some stability. A bag of rice, compared to between May last year and December, how the price has actually increased. And between then and now, it's probably flattened out. So, and that in itself is a plus. I mean, economic stability in itself is an objective of any government. Whether you're stable at 1 million naira a bag of rice, whether you're stable at 10,000 naira a bag of rice, the fact is that people can now heave a sigh of relief knowing that they won't wake up tomorrow and prices have changed them. So that in itself is a plus. What can now be done to ensure that these prices either start going down or people now get more money in their pockets to be able to afford these high prices should be the next challenge for government. Now, you can plow a lot of that into the agriculture sector and subsidize the farmers. That way, you subsidize a lot of their inputs, fertilizers and stuff like that, so that it lowers their cost. And as it lowers their cost, when it gets to the market, the price, dips. People will see that and say, okay, last time I bought, a penta of Gary at 2008. Now I'm buying it at 2003. It gives people hope that maybe in 6 months' time it can be 2000 and then 1009. So you embark on some of these programs that help the people, as opposed to spending all that money on what people can't see.
All right. Let's leave it here. Dr. Frederal giving us an insight into the economy of the country and most likely some of the reasons why the federal government may have added more monies to the budget. So many persons were a little bit of, are you sure this is not the monies they just want to, add to their pockets? Because why do you want to add monies again, since, like you mentioned, there is a debt that we're owing? How about putting that monies in debt, or maybe keeping it, or maybe even putting it in a sovereign wealth fund or something, just to show up so that if there is a need tomorrow, they wouldn't go borrowing again, add to the one that we already have. But again, I want to say a very big thank you, Frederal, for your time this morning. Truly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We're back shortly after this. Do stay with us.